Good afternoon and welcome to the COMIT Happy Hour here on the 9th of April at 3:30 p.m. Today we are joined by John Walker and Stuart Block looking at some of the procurement issues that can be overcome using advanced work packaging. Our host today, as usual, will be Stuart Young, who will take you through some of the lineup and introduce the panel. Certainly, the procurement world is something that needs to be changed, in my opinion, within the construction industry, and it's a really important topic that we need to get a grip of before we can move forward in our digital journey. So without further ado, let me hand you over to Stuart Young and we'll get started. Stuart.
Thanks very much, Ian, and thanks to our guests today. Thanks to all the attendees. Before I get into the session, I just want to introduce COMIT. COMIT is a collaboration platform of owners, contractors, solution providers and academia. We've got a history of developing and running demonstration projects that focus on increasing value through productivity improvement. We do get involved in projects. We've run a number of recent projects with some great outcomes. Get a look at the COMIT website and see what that is all about. But as I mentioned there, it's a small incremental improvement. We're focused on making improvements to improve productivity. And by being collaborative with all of those stakeholders, we can create new ways of adding value. Okay, before I get going into the session any further, I want to welcome 3 new members. We have HiveMap. Torsten, if you're on the call, welcome. HiveMap's knowledge graph technology predicts what will go wrong on large construction infrastructure projects so that customers can avoid billions in damages. Its decision-making engine is powered by language analysis, graph analytics, and machine learning. Recent proof of concepts with a big contractor in the Middle East saved considerable amounts delays versus the traditional PM methods, and it used merely unstructured text data from weekly reports. We've got Revitso. Revitso connects all project members on one platform. Revitso, you pronounce it, unifies BIM intelligence and makes it immediately accessible and actionable for the entire project team. And of course, we've got Agile Handover. They focus on digital transformation for FM knowledge and making FM knowledge 60 to 90% more accessible with Agile's handover technology. So welcome, new members. I will say as ever, if you've got any questions, please fire them through as we progress through the session. Try not to leave them to the end. We want to gauge how many questions we can actually ask in the session, although we've got an extra time session added on as well. So today's session, procurement, improving delivery and predictability with advanced work packaging. Materials and services can make up a significant part of a project spend, so it will pay to invest and get it right. Shortly we'll hear from Stuart and John, who will examine many aspects from initial order requirements, including data for modelling, vendor models, site material control, workforce planning, team interaction, and we'll also discuss the elements of the digital supply chain, which include supply chain implementation methodologies and best practices using technology infrastructure to support the digital supply chain. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is a video. Now, unfortunately, we couldn't get the sound to work. The video would play, but the sound wouldn't work. We weren't able to iron out the technology details with this. So what we've done is put it in the chat box at the side. So please watch that at your leisure. It's a great video. It's 1 minute long, and it introduces the AWP conference, which is held virtually at the end of April, or sorry, the 20th to the 22nd of April this month. Okay. Now, I have some poll questions. If you just bear with me, as ever at this part of proceedings, I'll introduce the first one. Bear with me 1 second. So, you should see the first question appear on the screen now. When should AWP be part of procurement? And the multi-choice with multi-answers. So I should see those now.
That's an interesting question, Stuart.
Yeah.
Certainly, in my world, the earlier we start collecting information, analysing it, assessing it, and acting on it, the better. So I would say sort of even before the inquiry, really. But it's
Couple
also
seconds.
so select as many as you think are successful.
Okay. I'm going to close that up and I'm going to share that. Thanks everybody for voting. So, a little bit of everything. Yeah, Stuart, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it's actually all of them. It should be a part of all of those stages: before the inquiry, post-inquiry, pre-award, ex-works, and on-site. So whoever clicked all of them is correct.
Fantastic. That's a bit of a curved one for this time of the Friday afternoon.
Yeah, I did say no curveballs there, but I didn't mean that. Okay, so the next one we've got is which customers or part of the project team can AWP help procurement with? You should be able to see that now.
That's another interesting one. And I wouldn't know which one to choose on that. Would have been, yes.
Not forgetting the actual thing, please select all that apply. So
yes,
you don't just.
I think you might be right there, Stuart. I think this might be another one that applies to all. So yeah, that's where my vote goes. I'll hand back over to you.
Yeah. Okay. Let me share the results of that. Thanks very much for participating. John, Stuart, if you want to jump in and make any comments on that.
Looks like everybody
Yeah,
picked up on your select all curveball.
Yeah. You have to read the question.
Right, exactly. No, I think the answers are reflective of the kind of the value that it provides across the board there if executed properly. And I think that's a key piece of it, is executing it properly across all silos, I guess, functional units.
It would be interesting to see which of these areas actually sees the most value and realizes the most value out of them, because there must be some difference in some of it. There's obviously value to everybody, but there must be one of these groups where the value is at its highest. And by the looks of things on this, the poll that's come back, the questions that come back, construction is felt as being the highest as such.
I think naturally we gravitate towards productivity for construction. One of the things that's not on here that's reflected probably through all of them is safety, and I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle as well, right? So we gravitate towards the construction, but the benefits throughout all of these kind of functions are really seen through safety and quality as well. So
yeah, and I suppose that helps to lower the risk overall, so potentially helps lower the financial burden across the entire project, whether you're from the financial department or the risks or the health and safety or any of those. So yeah, no, good.
Yeah, actually, to me, it's construction is probably the least that can help procurement with.
Oh, really?
Because construction's the tail end. So engineering helps procurement. Subcontracts help procurement. Project control certainly does, and project management does. Construction receives the outcome of procurement, really. They don't seem to help procurement with a lot.
Yeah.
Except for the warehousing, of course.
Yes. Yeah. No, interesting.
Yeah, it's getting out of that construction mindset.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for everybody for voting on that. I'll just tie that up now and move on. Yeah. Okay. So on to the session. I'll introduce both Stuart and John now. So Stuart Block, AWP manager with Fleur Farnborough, 30 years experience in the industry. Started his career as a welder in a module yard, gained over 20 years in project controls, project engineering, manager on offshore, onshore projects, workplace planning, and has had 15 years working Fleur. We've got John. John's a long-time Atlas RFID Solutions employee and has deployed multiple RFID implementations throughout the world, in addition to scoping, creating, consulting on numerous material management engagements. He now serves as VP of Strategic Services. So I'm now going to hand over to Stuart first, and then in succession, John will follow. Just bear with me now. I will just give control to Stuart. Okay, Stuart, over to you.
Right, let's just find the control. Okay, you should be able to see the screen nice and clearly. So, okay, so welcome everybody. So I'm going to start going through procurement part with AWP. Really what this is all about is the earlier we start with AWP across the whole project, the better it will be. But focusing solely on procurement, so I'm just going to talk about the points during the project when procurement department needs to be supported. So if we start off with during the inquiry stage, what does procurement need with the inquiry? So they need to design data. So they need to know what to order. They need to know if they're not going to get design data, will they be requesting catalogue data? Is this standard off-the-shelf items? When they do place the inquiry, are they going to want any models back from the suppliers? And then, of course, manufacturing data and material data. And then there's lots of other things that they're going to need backwards. So the first part is procurement needs to understand what they need to ask for. When does the project need the items is another part. Where does the project need the items? So once you've known what you need to buy on the project, go out for inquiry for, where does it need to go to? The more data you get earlier, or can give out earlier, the better your prices are going to be. Then how does it get fabricated? How does it get to the fabrication and construction sites? So where the project needs it, how does it get there? And you might be talking about a few nuts and bolts, valves, which could be shipped, lorried, air freighted, or you might be talking about a 12,000 ton vessel that can only go by specialist items, or it could be a module. It really comes down to what you actually need to purchase. And then once you got past the inquiry, you're then getting ready for the order placement. So again, what engineering delivers? So it's obviously going to be a lot more advanced than the inquiry. Is it going to be final data? Is it going to need design that needs to be worked on by the supplier? Really specifies what's exactly needed and when from the suppliers. And this then starts getting down to their design data. Are they going to supply a full set of catalogues? And those catalogues could be individual 3D models. They could be just a brochure. It could be a lot of material data. Then we start looking at vendor models. What specific models are needed? What attributes are needed? What format do these models need to be in? Everything that's going to make your project a lot more successful if you receive them. And it's also going to save a lot of time on your own design, having to remodel these, certainly for interface purposes. Then you're looking at manufacturing data. How and when is it going to be done? Has it got to be shipped? Do you have sub-suppliers? The material data, and a lot of things have got to be certified these days. So your material, where's your material search, your manufacturing runs, every piece of information you need. And it just goes on and on. But a lot of that you would have asked for preliminary in the inquiry, but you're reaffirming it into the order placement. And then also you need to reconfirm when the project really needs that. And of course, your project's moved on from the inquiry to the order placement, which could be 6 weeks, it could be 9 months, it could be a long time. And of course, the project's evolving. So procurement needs real help from project controls to know when is that item needed. Is it going to be needed ex works, or is it going to be needed actually delivered to site? Then of course you've got to finalize what the cost actually is. And that's before you place the order. So, but then post placement of the order, you then tidy up what's exactly needed again and when from the suppliers. Because things will change. You might have a vessel change. You might have a slightly different spec needed through the client changing the specs or the requirements. So again, design data. Has the catalog data changed? Vendor models would be advanced. So this is where you start going from your different model reviews, your HAZOPs with your suppliers. And again, manufacturing data, you're still pushing for that with material data. When's it going to arrive? When are they going to receive the materials? And change management, get back again, procurement with project controls. What has changed? The price might have changed. The supplier might come back and says, sorry, that material is not available for 6 months, but I've got an alternative, but it could cost you more money. There's all that, the design could change again. And then when you start going through expediting, this is where you start listening to what construction needs, what the warehousing is looking like on site. Because once you get into workplace planning, the latter part of AWP, they're going to start pulling what materials they need. So whilst you've set everything up from your design into construction work packages, which is great, that's at a nice level, procurement's purchased them against them, Expediting start to pull those materials or push those materials to site by CWPs. You then start looking at what does site really need at installation work packages. So they could look backwards or look forwards in the procurement cycle, saying, okay, we've got whichever ship groups needed. Can we swap those ship groups because we need these certain items earlier? And that's where the interaction between the whole project comes back into procurement. Okay, thanks, Stuart.
You're on there, Stuart Young.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll finish now, John. It's your part.
Yeah, over to
Great.
John.
Thank you, Stuart.
Yeah.
Perfect. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, all good.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, great. Well, hey, thanks for having me in today. I do want to talk about the digital supply chain. That was great, Stuart. Appreciate you talking a little bit about the procurement side of things. I want to focus a lot on kind of the aspect of delivery of the goods to the project side and how that interfaces with AWP and also some of the productivity advancements and opportunities that we have within kind of the digital supply chain concept. I'm going to go ahead here. Some of the topics I want to discuss today. First off, I just want to define the digital supply chain. What does that actually mean in terms of the function? What are some reasons to implement digital supply chains? There's obviously going to be pretty high levels of the pretty quick presentation here. I could spend hours talking about this, but just think about a little bit of the value that we've seen from implementing the digital supply chain. And then lastly, wrap it up with some of the components that make up a digital supply chain from the people, process, and technology aspect. So first, let's define digital supply chain. What does it mean here? Way I define the definition that's kind of resonated best with myself and our clients as well is really transforming the traditional exchanges of information from a document-centric environment to really a data-centric environment, specifically as it relates to the construction supply chain. So let me give a couple examples of really what that means. In the real world today that we live in, the deliveries come with paper packing lists that typically show what's on the shipment, a bill of lading that outlines the goods that are brought and delivered to that project site. It's typically in a paper-based environment. That information is then set in big piles of paper around the warehouse that has to then get manually keyed into the system. The reason we're keying that into the system is information purposes, right? And being able to show, the deliveries, what's on site, what's been delivered, how the material is made up. It's a very manual process typically. And so what that happens is there's a lot of people that need that information around the project site, from work-based planning, to schedulers, procurement people to close out invoices, to engineering to understand how the materials are delivered, where they're at. They can go look at them, measure them, do their inspection reports, all those things. People need to know information about these materials. And in a very document paper-based world, it takes manual data entry to get into the system, and there's a lag time before that information is made available. In a digital supply chain world, you have the supplier publishing a lot of that information prior to the materials actually departing their facility. So by enabling suppliers to create digital packing lists of information and goods that are shipping to the job site, it allows for early identification, early notification of information to all the various parties that need to consume that, such as the work-based planners and the procurement team and engineering and scheduling, as we rattled off before. They don't have to wait till this is now manually entered into the material management system or some other procurement system on the project site to get that information to then consume it into probably their system, right? So really switching from that document-centric mindset to a data-centric mindset for multiple purposes: early, alerting of goods that are shipping, as well as being able to share that information seamlessly across all the different technology solutions that we use on our projects today. So, that's one of the real kind of differences of that paper-based document-centric to the data-centric process of digital supply chain. So talk a little bit about why we're, creating a digital supply chain is some of the value. And this is the number one thing in my mind of why, companies and people are seeing value in creating this digital supply chain across their project execution. Number one is the digital transformation of all components and the data attributes that can be tied back to a work plan. Elimination of unmanaged ship loose and constraint-free IWPs. So what I mean by that. So my past has been in materials management, and one of the biggest problems that I had on the job site was dealing with items that I didn't know existed, i.e. unknown ship loose, unmanaged ship loose, subcomponents, accessories to main mechanical equipment tags. There's always seemed to be a massive problem. And the reason is because we buy a pump, 201P001, but in reality, the pump shows up at the job site in 15 different crates. So back to Stuart's comment about, when starts planning out their IWPs and they ask for the pump, if we didn't understand that all those subcomponents were related to that pump, we may be short issuing these materials to the field, creating constraints. And so by identifying these materials upstream, we're able to digitally connect all of these attributes together to eliminate a lot of those constraints that are seen in the field when we're issuing out materials to construction, to ensure the construction not only has the pump, but they also have the motor, the anchor bolts, gaskets, all the other components that go with that to make up that actual unit. So that's a huge piece of the puzzle. The next piece is integration of suppliers in their overall project plan. By allowing them into the systems and being able to author information, being able to update expediting information quickly, you're able to bring them into your overall project plan. And really both parties are kind of winning there. They're understanding changes in RAS dates, and they're also publishing changes in delivery dates that could impact your schedule. So this digital collaboration of suppliers has shown to be, a real value add. And then auto ID. I refer to auto ID as anything that's like a barcode, RFID tag, passive or active, that helps identify materials in the field. And I think there's been plenty of studies to show that RFID adds value to construction materials management by, simply being able to keep up with your materials at the lowest level, know where they're at, to helping, automate a lot of transactions that may take place downstream, such as warehousing or receiving goods in the inventory. So utilizing that auto ID has been a big value driver for our clients and for others in industry. So let's talk about the program of what really makes up a solid supplier engagement digital supply chain program. Number one is develop as a project program. Develop a strategy early. So you cannot get in early enough, in my opinion, in terms of setting bid packages up, the proper contract language, so that everybody understands clearly what are the expectations to participate in this program. And so, that's with the suppliers, with the fabricators, with the vendors, being able to make them aware of the program that they're going to have to participate in to supply goods to your project sites, eliminates overall frustration on their end, and dropping something after a contract's already signed on them that oftentimes could result in a change order. But clearly defining those expectations early with suppliers allows everybody to be on the same page of what's expected. And then monitoring that compliance. So I think, for a long time, we've added in contracts things for suppliers to provide, vendors to provide, but actually monitoring that compliance and is a key piece. And, I sat on research team 363 out of CII, and one of the big findings from that research team was around data compliance. And, if a vendor ships items that are not in compliance today physically, there's oftentimes an OS&D and NCR raised against that. Some of the findings out of that project and research team is we should start treating data as that, because data is oftentimes as important as the physical thing in terms of planning and properly ensuring that construction can be productive as possible. And then being able to have a scaling training program, really being able to outreach to the suppliers and show them how to use the new software platform or show them how to attach some sort of auto ID, really having a light scalable platform that allows you to reach, hundreds of suppliers that could be servicing these projects. And then the fourth object is really providing durable and affordable hardware to the project teams. And what I mean by that is, being able, if you're going to use an RFID type solution, ensure that the solution is cost effective for what you're tagging, as well as durable for the environment, such as the rough construction world that we work in, as well as the harsh environments that these items are used in. And then lastly, from a technology perspective, is cloud-based software on the consumer device. So number one, need to be able to provide access to suppliers and segment that information properly so that they can only see what's related to their scope of work, and also allow it to access on devices that are already in their shop. They don't need special tablets or readers to be sent to them. They got an iPhone or Android, probably 10 of them sitting around in their shop that they can pick up and use in most cases. So being able to have that extended out on those platforms is very important. And then lastly, this is a big finding out of the research team as well, was to empower a digital supply chain coordinator, really focusing on the overall digital supply chain health. And so, just as workplace planning kind of birthed a workplace coordinator, same can be said with this digital supply chain, is kind of birthing this digital supply chain coordinator that works hand in hand with your workplace planners to ensure that supply chain is keeping up with demand and all the data attributes are aligning properly across the project. A couple more things here to talk about, just really being able, like I said, the software is a key piece. We're Atlas RFID, we're a software company at heart, right? So offering out the software capable of creating digital packing lists of suppliers is huge. You want to have the ability to auto ID materials, RFID tag, barcode, digitally identify those. Containerize, not everything just comes on the back of a flat deck. We've got them in crates, got them in sea cans, got them on floats, whatever you want to call it. But being able to see that containerization and then being able to status those materials through the supply chain. Lastly, ability to share that information through multiple systems and link that back to the work plan is highly important in terms of productivity and visibility into the digital supply chain. So talk real quickly about the types of technology are typically seen in a digital supply chain. Obviously you have the auto ID, a couple of examples here. We got a barcode, passive RFID tag, active RFID tag. Those are obviously super helpful in terms of tracking materials. You have the mobile devices. So, that's one thing, is keep it light. So, the software needs to have the ability to leverage the peripherals already in these powerful phones that we have, right? They already have GPS in them. They don't need a GPS sensor. They already have a camera in them that can act as a barcode. So use those peripherals to create a lighter experience for the suppliers and not a whole bunch of infrastructure to have to support. And then, there's obviously gate readers that can be implemented through critical checkpoints along the supply chain, such as a fabricator that's pumping out 100,000 spools or something throughout 2 years of a project. Have a gate reader that automatically tells you when items are shipping to your job site and how that impacts your schedule and other work packages downstream. So that's a huge piece. And then lastly, I mentioned it, the digital supply chain coordinator is a huge piece of this entire puzzle. We're adding with the digital supply chain, we're adding a new concept. We're adding a new requirements for suppliers, for project teams. So with that, there should be somebody to help manage that underneath kind of your AWP champion on a project site, because the value of having that data all tied together far outweighs any extra work that may be required in terms of creating a digital supply chain or employing a position such as a digital supply chain coordinator. That person can really help bridge the gap between procurement and construction to help digitally make this process very, very successful. So Well, that's fast. At about 10, 15 minutes, I wanted to get through it to the question side of things. Hopefully that all made sense. And I'll pause there and turn it back over to Stuart. And I appreciate everybody's time. And like I said earlier, drop the questions in the chat box over there. We'd be happy to jump on them and answer them.
Thanks very much, John and Stuart. That was superb. Thank you. Okay, let me just
bring everybody back onto the cameras.
Yeah.
Here we go. Splendid. Good stuff. Excellent. So thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much, Stuart and John. Awesome. Some really interesting stuff. And it's something that ticks a mental box for me, is how we are being asked to procure a lot of information for the life cycle of an asset as such through our BIM and our digital twins world. But if we can utilize that information for other purposes, such as work packaging and tracking our supplies and materials, then we're adding even more value into what we're procuring on the information front. I think that's one of the things that I've been trying to champion along the way for quite a few years now, is trying to get people to understand that there is value or multiple values in one piece of information. The client might want that piece of information, but also it's really important for the contractor, for the EPC, for the supply chain as well. And each one of those will get some sort of productivity gain out of that data, especially in the way that you're suggesting how it's managed. So yeah, I've got there was a few questions on some of your presentations. Unless there's, sorry, Stuart, I'm jumping in here, very excited about this kind of stuff. Love it. Are there any questions coming in from the audience, Stuart, that we need to?
I don't see any yet. I don't see any yet, and that was going to be my next request. Is send your questions in. We've got a couple of others that were sent in earlier. I don't know if you want to start with those, Ian. Do you?
Yeah, I think one of that always interests me, because we did so many projects really early on with RFID technologies with COMIT, looking at how we could track some materials. And I think, Stuart Young, you had a really interesting one where you were putting an RFID tag in bulk materials for road surfacing. And we got permission for that tag to actually go into the hot pot, as it were, and get destroyed as you melted down the bulk material to lay on the surface of the road. And we got permission for that actually to become part of the road surface afterwards, which was really quite cool. But I think the technology's moved on. So I don't know whether this one is for Stuart or for John. The difference between the various tag technologies we've got now, the active and the passive, can you give us a bit of just a bit of a rundown on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can take that one. I would like to make a comment on your first statement about the information sharing through all the various parties, and I think that's a key piece of the puzzle there that I was trying to allude to in the very beginning, is that by having those suppliers digitally publish that information, there are so many stakeholders downstream, clients, subcontractors, you name it, that can benefit from that information in various aspects. So by collecting all that information, you can particleize out the bits that are valuable throughout the rest of the execution team. So having that in a paper-centric format would create a lot of work to kind of get that turned in. So yeah, I agree 100% with you. It's one thing we're really excited about and what we've been seeing. So I did want to touch on that. So great question on the RFID types. Really kind of IoT, auto ID. There's a lot being thrown at us these days, whether it's BLE, whether it's RFID, whether it's active RFID, GPS, passive, you name it. So I can touch a little bit on the type of RFID tags that we're currently using and that we've been using for a long time. They're kind of tested and great for our environment. And that's the active and the passive RFID. So we got our start with active RFID technology. Active RFID tags, very basic technology explanation. They have a battery on the inside of them. They emit a signal every 3 seconds, and then readers either drive around, fly around, walk around, and can pick up those signals interpret the signal strength, know the GPS of the device, and then understand physically in the world on a map, GPS coordinates, where that material is or where that RFID tag is. That's how Active works. Active has about a 100-meter read range. They're a more expensive tag than, say, Passive, but they definitely have their use in construction, such as massive laydown yards with lots of spools and, you know, not a lot of ways to kind of drive in and out. You got a tower crane rather than boom cranes getting in. Active technology is pretty good for that. Now, on the flip side, Passive RFID tags, something we've been experimenting with very extensively over the past probably 4 years, is a Passive RFID tags technology. There's thousands of different types of Passive RFID tags, from badges to the tags we use for materials. So there's a lot of use cases of these throughout all supply chains and throughout all real applications. But the Passive RFID technology is a tag that allows for it essentially is energized by a reader, and it gives out a signal. It's got a lower read range, but the key piece of the puzzle is a cheaper option. And so what that allows for clients to do is to saturate more of their materials with Passive RFID tags due to not having a very, very high price tag. You're talking 50 cents a tag compared to some of the other tags that are way more expensive. So anyway, those are the different types of technology that we have seen, and the Passive RFID tags have been really popular, especially with the digital supply chain implementations lately.
Yeah. So on the active tags that you use on site, how long do those last? And what's really, I mean, you know, without going into all the different types, what's the kind of the price difference between doing a passive and an active, roughly?
Yeah, so we'll talk specifically about the tag. So the active tag has a lifespan of 5 to 7 years, based on and that's based on the ping rate. So as I mentioned, the active tag sends a unique signal, right, at a ping rate. And so the most optimal pattern that we've seen is about 3 seconds. And at a ping rate of 3 seconds in kind of normal conditions, it's 5 to 7 years. In colder conditions, it's probably more on the 5-year side of things. In more temperament conditions, it's 7 years. Passive RFID tags don't have a battery inside of them. They can last like 50 years. So they're more dependent on the reader energizing them than energizing themselves. And from a cost perspective, active can be anywhere from $20, $25 to passive being 50 cents or less. And there's many different variations of that type technology that impacts those prices. But that kind of gives people usually a good ballpark price.
Yeah. So Stuart, on the same sort of front, what's your experience on FLIR sites? What do you go for normally? Do you go for the active side or the passive side, or what's your experience on that one?
Well, a lot of the times, obviously, due to country logistics, we can't actually use active because some countries won't allow them.
Oh.
So when we've got our projects around the world, some countries won't allow them. So certainly through the Soviet Union, you can't ship active. So, but yeah, we have quite a few passive. It depends what the client spec is, but we tend to mark our own laydown areas with GPS coordinates. So the warehouse knows exactly where they're going, so we know which materials are which GPS square it's at. Yeah, and I'm presuming. So we do slightly differently.
So I'm presuming you also treat those tags as an asset itself, so they also appear in an asset register with a maintenance email. Yeah.
Yep. But going back to your first question about the data, a lot of the suppliers actually create their own data anyhow. So it's not reinventing the wheel; it's utilising what they currently do standard. So.
Yeah, so I've got another question. It came up in a webinar / workshop I was part of a little while back. Was the naming conventions we use for our materials and things like that. And you probably come across this. We've got a problem in the UK that one manufacturer will name something one way, another manufacturer will name it another way, etc. And when you've got a large job site and you're procuring from multiple manufacturers, you have a very disjointed naming convention or numbering convention or whatever it might be in there. Do you have some sort of label fish as such within your systems that says these numbers relate to something like this, or how do you deal with that, Stuart?
Yeah, we tend to take in the supplier's ID number and we'll supplement it with our own standard. So that's how we can get with multiple to one to keep it simpler.
So you use a standard as such in there. Do you know if the other oil and gas owners and EPCs, etc., do they do something similar? Or
yeah, they all have their own ways of doing things, and they've got their own systems. So they'll tend to bring in the supplier tag and supplement that with their own tag, which usually will be a project tag. That way you can get around the many different suppliers with the same product to be in the one project tag.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I suppose that helps with making sure that when you hand that information over for operations and maintenance, you actually know what you've got, rather than potentially what a supplier describes it. It's actually described as what the owner wants it to be described.
Yeah, exactly. In the same way as when you give it a project tag, you might have 10 projects coming out of the same warehouse. So it helps that way as well.
Yeah.
I would also echo that back. Is it's very important to have that supplier reference. You don't just want to break it and put your tag on it, like Stuart's saying, is have that reference, because if you have to communicate with that vendor or supplier, they want to communicate the way they're used to it, and so it helps with sort of mitigations of RFIs or OS&Ds or NCRs, anything that might pop up. Is having that supplier reference in the database is really important for communications back to the person that the origination of that item.
I suppose.
Can I jump in, Ian? Just 1 second. One of the things I wanted to ask John there, and I think you may have touched on this a little bit, is how many uses can you get out of the tags? Because you mentioned 7 years there, and whilst a lot of projects will run for 2 and 3 years, how many times? I mean, to make it more cost effective, what are we looking at? 2 uses, 3 uses, 4 uses? What are we looking at?
Yeah, I mean, on a longer project, it's using active RFID. You can get probably about 3 uses out of them for the duration. And that's not because of the tag life. That's the supply chain utilization of it, right? Because a spool may be fabricated, that's a month, comes to the shop, it sits for 4 months on the project site, and then gets taken off and sent back. By that time, so that whole loop. We're seeing the active tags, about 3 times. They can totally be reused as many times as you would like. The passive tags as well. Like I said, there's a lot of different variations of passive RFID tags. There's very simple label type RFID tags, and those are almost disposable consumables. Whereas there are some more ruggedized passive RFID tags that those are more inclined to be recycled in the future. So there's a ton of different types of passive tag technology, but the cheaper label type tags, those are usually, you use them again, but they're usually just kind of tossed out. The active tags and the more durable passive are definitely viable solutions for recycling to lower that total cost, and we encourage that.
Yeah, that's got to be attractive right from the off, hasn't it?
Yeah.
The other thing I've got,
and certainly within the, Stuart, I've got one for that. And certainly with the offshore industry, a lot of the active tags are put on for asset management for the suppliers.
Yeah.
So they use it a different way. It's not just for the project; it's keeping track of their own equipment.
Yeah, that leads me to the other question. In respect of material manufacturers or suppliers, do you think they can play a bigger part in this? In other words, at point of origin, when it's actually leaving the factory, adding some identification into it there, and linking it back into the whole supply chain of, utilizing BIM better. That's where I'm going. Does that make sense, John? Is that something that you see, they could get involved in earlier?
Absolutely. And we've interfaced with several different, BIM modeling solutions that allow now with suppliers and specifically fabricators, using solutions like this upstream, whether it's putting a tag on before shipment or even some statusing through fabrication, to consume that data output, pass it into a model to visually represent supply chain fabrication information. So absolutely, I think the further upstream is kind of the more beneficial for all parties involved. for sure. And, you know, I mean, I think there's that goes in with, like, you know, the more you ask, possibly the more pushback. And I think as industry, we have an opportunity to make it a value add for all parties. And, you know, some of the thoughts with that is, you know, by creating these digital packing lists upstream, could that be a catalyst for supplier payment earlier on certain milestones? So I think there's some value that could be looked at for all parties, not just the receiving party of kind of the client and EPC and contractors, right? I think there's, you know, there's a lot of opportunity across that whole thing to get that information out. But that's
yeah.
What sort of encouragement do you think we could give to them? I mean, one of the projects I worked on a few years back was to identify the impediments in materials, or better use of materials. And one of the things that we came up with was to have a suite of KPIs, because people that were actually in the materials control, they didn't believe there was an issue. And it was only when a suite of KPIs were developed, you say, well, you know, materials were delivered late, that impacted on the program here, and the whole thing was like opened up, and it was a surprise to a lot of people because of the silo situation. But having a suite of KPIs made a real difference, and it was able to create some value that previously you couldn't see. And I think going forwards, and what you've just said, John, I think that adds some real weight to the argument. You know, being able to reuse stuff, I think, is another one. I've just noticed now there's a lot of questions formed, and I think some of them are actually around this. So, yeah. Sorry, Ian, you were going to say something.
I'm just going to add in there that I think it's going to become more of a legal requirement as we move forward. If you've all read the Grenfell report, the Hackett report on that we need to start looking at the golden thread. And understanding not only where the decisions have been made on the procurement of things, but also where that thing has been manufactured, right from the very sort of almost having a passport to each individual thing as it's manufactured, created, transported, installed, and operated, maintained, etc. into the future. Because the paneling on that building, they needed to know everything about it, and yet that information wasn't necessarily available or had been covered up in certain places. So I think we're going to see it more of a legal requirement as we move further into the future. Anyway, as you say, yes, there's a whole plethora of questions there, Stuart. You want to?
Yeah, I'll start off with the one at the top. Brandon, I've replied to you in the answer box there. Just get in touch, and I'll pick out the webinar that you need to see. So that was the first one. The second one is from Giovanni. Most sites are in very remote areas, and I think, Stuart, you touched on this a little bit, where efficiency and structure of IT infrastructure could be difficult to maintain. How much robust is this technology to run with a relatively weak or basic IT infrastructure? I suppose either of you could answer that, John or Stuart.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it from a technology perspective. You know, since we've been doing this for about 12, 13 years now, I guess, and the number one thing that we realized at the very beginning is lack of connectivity across the board. So, you know, that was something we were faced with very early on. We work in a completely offline mode. And so what I mean by that is the workers, if you're in a supplier shop or if you're in a job site, you don't have, whether it be LTE or, you know, cellular connectivity or a Wi-Fi lit up yard, workers can grab their phones, download the information, go out and work. And then when they get back in connectivity in the office trailer or something like that, they can push that information back and it populates the system. So we've been working in an offline mode for a long time. And the RFID tags aren't required to connect to a network. They communicate to the reader, which is in an offline mode as well. If you have lit up yard, you know, cell phone connectivity, all that kind of good stuff, then it can work in a live environment. But if you don't, we work completely offline and can kind of batch that process back. Yeah.
Do you want to add to that, Stuart?
No, it's exactly what we used out in Kazakhstan. Same thing. Offline readers, went and scanned it, took it back to the office.
Right, okay. On the question here has come in, on the RFID front, UWB is starting to rise in importance, going beyond active RFID UWP is now in recent iPhones and Samsung devices. Are you working with this, and what do you see on the horizon for the RFID tag? If you're not doing anything yet, is that something that COMIT could get involved as an active project? Thanks for asking that, Francis. John, is that a question for yourself?
Yeah, I'll take the technology aspect of that. From the types of tags, like I kind of said at the beginning, we're being thrown and we're seeing, quite a few different options. There's UWB or BLE, Bluetooth. There's, different types of passive tags that are coming out, battery assisted passive, all different types of options on the table. We have an in-house hardware engineering team that focuses on looking at all of these different variations of auto ID that are coming out. And, we're constantly doing R&D to figure out if there's a better solution, a better price point for our clients, whatever it may be, or better value, better experience on multiple different types of auto ID. So I'll say, yes, we are experimenting right now. We use passive and active RFID technology pretty extensively. Main reason being is that we have found that that's just tried and true and has been very, very, very good over the past few years. And so we haven't seen a reason to completely change yet, but we are experimenting internally with different types of auto ID technologies.
Okay. Thank you, John, for that one. Stuart, anything to add? No.
No,
okay.
we're trying to get back to suppliers to actually do a lot of the coding for us. So for example, like Steelwork, when we try to every bit they ship, we want to know what is being shipped. So whether it's scanned at their warehouse, scanned when it arrives, but we're also putting that into our 3D models now so that we can show an assembly model. So we can actually show three-dimensionally what's missing, what isn't.
Yeah.
So having that done earlier benefits everybody.
Yeah. A question we've got here on that subject is are there any standards to follow? That's coming from Francis also. Any standards?
I've got a quick question on that last bit, if I may. I suppose it does sort of hit to the sort of standard world as well. The things that the steelwork that you're procuring, do you try in your design work to get standard lengths of steel? Because we were doing a bit of a study a couple of years back on if I procure a standard length of steel from the manufacturer, it comes in at a certain amount per ton. But then if I send it to the fabricator to make it slightly different or whatever it might be, it comes in an X times the amount that is per ton. But if we start designing using a standard length of steel rather than something that's slightly different, the cost potentially of delivering that steel work could be seriously reduced. Is that something you're looking at or you've played with?
Yeah, we're starting to look at a lot of standard sections, certainly standard assemblies. So because we want to bring together the least number of pieces we can get to save the on-site labour. So it's a trade-off between is it more expensive to ship and cheaper to assemble, or cheaper to ship and slightly more expensive to assemble. So it's understanding both methods and how you're going to ship it is key.
Yeah, I suppose that sort of kind of like plays into that standards question that we just, well, I'm not sure whether it's an RFID standards, but that was more of a steel standards question. Where's the,
fine. The tag numbers.
The tag numbers. Yeah, it's an interesting one on the tag numbers. So when we were doing the Crossrail project, we looked at tag numbers actually saying something. So it had function, classification, location, and a unique ID at the end. So when you looked at something, you roughly knew where it was going to go, what it was going to do, and how it was going to do it. And the two thoughts there was that if you had it that it meant something, the security element in a public location wasn't great. Let's say if you had a security camera in a public location on a station, you could understand that this control box was actually part of this security camera system because you looked at the two numbers and went, I know exactly what that is. So if I knock that off the wall, I can do some criminal activity in this location because it's going to stop the camera from working. And sort of along those lines. So the kind of thinking was that you could save a lot of money potentially with giving the label a meaning, but at the same time, you might upset the apple cart and the security elements by not giving it meaning as such. Do you put meaning into your numbers?
Well, certainly from a Fleur side, no, we've got a standard number and it just goes with the discipline downwards. But behind that, the databases will contain all the relevant information it goes with.
So it's something that, you know, if you looked at it, you'd have no idea what it meant. But if you've got the reader and the database behind it, you've got all the information you need.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and then so for us, just to elaborate a little bit on that, you know, whatever the client, whether it's Fluor, whether it's some other EPC, you know, there's different ways that they identify their items and catalogs and engineer tag numbers and so forth, and that's how we recognize materials within the system. We essentially use RFID tags as just a license plate, and so I think that goes with one of the questions about, you know, are they do suppliers have the ability to label the tag correctly? We try and make it as foolproof as possible in terms of not pre-assigning RFID tags to materials. We've done that. You can do that. It's, you know, you get into a point of, did I put the right tag on the right thing? And it kind of gets a little convoluted there. So we try and use it as a license plate. So if anybody comes up and identifies that material with, you know, scans the barcode with their camera phone, it can pull up, like Stuart was saying, a tremendous amount of engineering information or other bits of supply chain construction information from the actual software. The other thing that we've seen a lot of success with is we have the ability to print information on the tags, such as barcodes. So, you know, you have a Bluetooth barcode printer that not only prints a barcode that identifies that catalog item or that material, but it also has human readable content on it. So it can tell you the description, it can tell you the PO number, it can tell you, you know, what part of the plan it's in. So there are solutions in the event that you need some readable content from a human that may not have a device or access to the software at that time. So just depending on what's really needed from the client.
Yeah, we had a really good idea. I was working with the people on the Maha Metro in India, and all their assets have got little QR code type things all over them. And so they issue all the people who travel on the metro a nice little app, which has got, you know, times of the trains, delays, information, passenger stuff, and whatever in there. But it's also got a little app in it that if you wave your phone at the QR code, you can report that asset if it's broken. So it might be a ticket barrier that's broken or a sign that's broken or something that's not quite right, because people love to complain. And if you've got the ability to complain about something specific, then you've suddenly got a million eyes traveling backwards and forwards on your Maha Metro every day. That's going to give you an update on the the condition of some of your assets. So it was a pretty cool idea. I was very impressed by what they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
well, I suppose the other thing, Ian, onto that is, have you actually ever scanned a QR code yourself on a parcel being delivered?
Yeah,
I done one a few months ago, and I was amazed how much information about me was linked to that QR code.
Yeah, we find that a lot of the military stores, etc., have now got QR codes or data matrix codes against them, and you scan them, and yeah, there's stupid amounts of, I would say, insecure information that you can gather from that code, which really you shouldn't be able to. Yeah. So as I say, got a question here from Phil Brown, and his question is there a rule of thumb that helps you to decide when you reap the best benefits of using RFID?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of it's a case by case basis, you know, in terms of, you know, when I look at it, I think about it in a couple different ways. When to apply RFID at all, and then when to apply passive versus active. So, you know, if you're looking at it, we go through, I speak from the Atlas side of things, we go through what's called a tagging strategy with our clients. And we identify the kind of material responsibility matrix and all the different materials that are coming into the project site, and basically grade those on a risk standard and say, hey, these are, you know, long lead items, these are expensive items. It's probably a good idea to put some extra level of RFID technology on the way that's active or passive. And then we get down into, you know, hey, these are bulk fittings. They're important. We need to understand how many we've got. We need to help, you know, automate some of the transactions that come into place. But if we lost one, we could probably get it within, you know, a day or so. So maybe that's a good candidate for barcoding. So we go through that tagging. Sorry, this is just a couple of very basic examples to determine what sort of technology is best based on the material. Now, the other aspect of that is when to use active versus passive. And a good rule of thumb on that is active RFID technology is really great for managing materials, and let's say areas where you issue materials to a contractor and those materials may go far off from, you know, say 10, 20 meters off of the road, and you need to keep up with them. So you want to have a little extra distance in your reader and technology to be able to keep up with them under racks and kind of squirrel away locations. Now, if your focus is really on, you know, cycle counting and being able to really saturate all your materials to digitally identify those, kind of in a digital supply chain aspect, you know, passive RFID has been a very popular solution over the past few years with that. So, you know, there's different pros and cons, but we do a tagging strategy to determine the best type of technology to be used based on the client's needs.
Okay, we got another question here from Giovanni. It's a scenario-based question. Imagine you have pipe bars tagged with barcode stroke RFID. Normally, pipe bars get cut into pieces at site during the fabrication. I suppose this is down the the bulk materials route potentially. How do you handle the remaining part of the single pipe bar with the next cut? Yeah, it is clear, Giovanni. Thanks for that. It reminds me of the bulk materials delivered to site. How do you manage that? And I know there was a few thoughts a couple of years ago about nanotechnology. I don't think it ever came to anything, but what are your thoughts on that, John, or Stuart for that matter? How did you handle that? So,
yeah, drops and stuff like that, piping and all that, and extra based on, you know, cuts and stuff in the field. We can handle that as, you know, kind of take that catalog or take that item, take that dimensions and put that back into inventory. Such as you're looking at fabrication and stuff, you drop, you know, say 2 meters off a 10-meter pipe, and you want to put that schedule type pipe back into inventory. We can do that in the field on the devices to say, you know, this item, we cut 8 meters off this, we got 2 meters left, we make 2 different materials, and then you can put a barcode on the new material, put an RFID tag on it, and put that back into inventory. You can handle that all on the devices today, and then that information that's added as extra can be added back into, you know, your availability of that material. So I mean, like for example, piping, that pipe is, you know, whatever carbon steel or schedule it is essentially could turn back into a bulk commodity, and then it just adds to your quantity that you have on hand of that catalog item within our system. So, and then that could be used for forecasting completability of scopes of work later on, because now it's back kind of in surplus, back in our inventory. So
wow.
you can handle that.
So, question here from Anthony, and I think it's quite pertinent as the UK is currently, I think, in the chair for COP26, and the climate change conference is going to be happening in the UK in November. He's interested to hear about the experience of collating data related to measurement of carbon for transporting using RFID tagging methodologies. Is that something that you do, Stuart or John? I put it sort of to Stuart, because I think you've probably got Fleur have got a company policy on carbon, and I think they're working towards the COP26. Is that right?
Yeah, we are working towards the carbon neutral, of course, but Yeah, we don't seem to do too much of that on our projects than to looking at certainly for like deliveries and stuff like that. But we just tend to look at it as a project overall and put some figures through it.
I suppose with that if you've got, going back to an earlier point that was made about being able to track materials right from their inception of creation in the factory all the way through, having some sort of passport or some sort of ID that allows you to track that, being able to understand the miles as such, the carbon miles, not only in just taking it from the factory to your site, but also where the original materials for that, whatever is fabricated, come from, and being able to put together that carbon package, I think would be important. Something that you do, John, at all? Do you get involved in that?
Yeah, that's one that we haven't really done a lot of in terms of compiling that information into, like I said, a carbon package. The data exists to be leveraged to understand kind of where things have traveled from. I mean, because there could be multiple suppliers around the world supplying the same materials that have varying distances traveled. So, we're able to see the origination of that material and the, landing side of that material, which would tell you in theory, kind of distance traveled. Now, it's not going to be an exact science because it's not actively tracking like a GPS tag where you can see breadcrumbs. Those exist, but they're a much more expensive solution. But you could get, you could see the origination of it, the origin of it, and you could see where it landed, and compile all the different shipments that have come in to be able to get generally a good idea. But you're not going to get to the foot, right, by that. So you don't know if the driver turned off and went 20 miles this way and then came 20 miles back because he made a wrong turn. I can't really tell you that with passive or active, but
I suppose
we have.
The tag might not necessarily tell you that, but there was a presentation we had at one of the conferences about 3 or 4 years ago now from an organisation in Cambridge called Combustion. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but they were actively measuring the carbon produced on the vehicle itself. So the materials that were on the vehicle were associated with the vehicle, and so therefore the active carbon that was being recorded for the transportation was also in a database which was associated with the materials on the vehicle. I think sometimes you could take these things too far, perhaps, but then you're looking at the value proposition. If your company's objective is purely aimed at carbon, I think a blanket, it's about 20 miles, probably isn't quite accurate enough for, because if you accelerate or decelerate, or if it's a twisty 20 miles, that's a hell of a lot more than 20 motorway miles on your carbon footprint. Anyway, okay, let's keep moving down the questions. Stuart, which one have we got next?
I think we've pretty much covered everything. Francis asked a question about passive tags. Have limited bits and can easily put tags of info. How do they use the bits and coding? What is the recommended tag size? And he puts in with a question mark, 1028 or higher. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe John, you'd be familiar with that, 1028?
I had a little bit of hard time understanding the question. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head what that means. Now, in terms of, I think one of the questions was what kind of recommendation of passive tags and size and all of that. I can definitely answer that. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a hardware engineering team, and if you're familiar with RFID technology, you know that there are thousands of tags out there, and the tags that we use, we've selected based on extensive R&D to ensure that this solution works from a distance reading capability standpoint as well as an environmental durability standpoint. And so we have a set of probably about 10 tags that we recommend depending on the material type it's being applied to. For example, we have some tags that can get zip tied onto outside of a crate or on the outside of a wooden cable reel. And we have some tags that are great for zip tying onto a piece of steel. And so we can make recommendations based on the materials being tracked, what tag it should be used from a passive standpoint.
Yeah, I'm presuming the question is about the amount of information stored on the tag itself, 1028 bits.
Sorry, okay, that is, we don't store anything really on the tag. As I mentioned earlier, we use it as a license plate. So tag storage size is not an issue for us. We use it to reference information in our cloud-based database.
Yeah.
Okay, next question I've got here is, how deep in the ground could an RFID tag be buried next to, say, for instance, a HV cable, and still be read by the reader? That's from Anthony. Good question. I like that. Yeah.
It is a good question. We've had some questions in R&D on like pipelines and other things going into the ground and tracking underground piping and stuff like that. I will say, from our perspective, that passive RFID tags getting buried into the ground, and the solutions that we've been using 99% of the time have been tracking things above ground. So I personally don't have a lot of experience with tracking things buried in the ground, such as cable or underground piping. It's mainly been kind of above ground, if I'm being honest. I know that there's capabilities to track those. I mean, we've had some situations where people want to track a drilling pipe and embedding, RFID tags in the collar of the drilling pipe as it goes down into the hole. You can track it with the reader and know which ones you're pulling in and out and using, and kind of utilization of those. So there are solutions in place that can handle that and do that. It's not our sweet spot. It's not our bread and butter. We typically kind of help with the above ground materials management aspect of that. But we're always happy to explore solutions and stuff like that too. So
brilliant. That Ian just sprung to mind. That's the thing you throw in the trench.
Yeah. Coincidentally enough, I have one sitting on my desk, which is a liquid-filled ball with an RFID with an antenna that points directly upwards. So whichever way it falls into the trench, you've got the reading from above. And I think when we were dropping them into pile caps, Morgan Sindel got involved in this back, I think it was Pudding Mill Lane. It's a while ago now. But we could read those through, I think it was 2 meters of the concrete at the top of the pile caps that we were dropping them into, which was pretty cool. Obviously, it was quite a powerful reader that we were using that was specific for the job. There's an interesting question coming from Fran here, and one potentially Stuart might want to jump in on this. And this is about tracking people. So it says, it sounds like the tracking materials is pretty solid, but the ultimate work packaging includes people and assembly. And a work effort start thing. Do you track people level and skills, and do analytics over time on skills needed and time to install assembly? So are you looking at people as well as materials? Stuart?
Yes, we are. Yeah, we do. But it depends what the regulations of the country are. Again, we can't do it within the UK, but it has been done on some job sites to see where we don't pick up the exact person. It picks up what their trade is and where they've been for so long. So yeah, we see where scatters of people are. So it all come back to the GDPR.
Yes. Yeah, I suppose you can look at time on tools for certain tasks. So in the future, you can optimize your work packages and how long that work package should take by looking at previous time on tools, your analytics of previous work.
Yeah, and we can also use it for safety as well. Because if somebody's injured and they can find that pin, you can find out exactly where they are to direct them to, instead of somebody saying, oh, they're over there. Yeah. If you've actually got an active tag on a person, you can find out exactly where they are.
And I suppose on that front as well, you could potentially record how much exposure they have to certain things like vibration or to hazardous locations on that construction site. If there's, how often do they walk through somewhere which is very hot, or potentially it's got, radioactive capabilities? I don't know, but something along those lines.
Yeah, it's the same as your security card when you go through gates. That measures in and out of that person. So I know certainly at Sizewell Nuclear Power Station, they have that already on your card. So they've got the little reader yourself, you've got your swipe card, so it knows how long you're exposed for, and that stores that data.
And I suppose I really don't see why a lot of this GDPR stuff is an issue in the UK, because we've got, you travel through London, you have an Oyster card. You tap into an area, you tap out of an area. It records all your information, knows exactly when you arrive, when you leave, what routes you take, and we don't think anything about it whatsoever. Yet, when it comes to a workplace which is potentially more dangerous, and we need to analyse those timings more closely, we feel that it's against our legal rights as human beings. I'm sure that's a mute point for somebody along the line.
Exactly.
I think we're done on questions now. I don't think there's any more new ones coming. I think we've answered pretty much everything that's on there. So I'd say thank you very much to everybody that's asked questions. That's fabulous. That's 35, 40 minutes worth of questions. Brilliant. Thank you. So we're in it. We've been in extra time for a few minutes now. I'd like to say thanks very much to everybody. A couple of things just to close out on, a few announcements. I'll give everybody an opportunity to finish up in a minute, but thanks to the sponsors, to O2 and Rebim. As ever, we couldn't do it without you guys. Join the conversation. I've been asked several times throughout the session, is the recording available? Yes, I believe it will be available on Monday. Go look on the Commit website, it'll be there, or you might get the link through the send out afterwards. There is a follow-up email. Join the conversation through social media as ever, and we've another session on the 30th with Corec, and that's called Connected Construction, and that involves Trimble, looking at some near and future developments shaping the construction sector. So some great stuff coming up. So only thing left is over to Ian first. Parting comments, Ian?
I just wanted a quick chance not only to both thank John and Stuart for a really interesting conversation, which has been fabulous today and something that's really close to a passion of my own. But I want to take the opportunity to tell everybody that one of the projects we started back in 2013 has it finished in 2018. We've never really had a chance to write up the results. The Infrastructure Asset Data Dictionary for the UK initiative that was put together by Commit back in 2013, I finally got around to putting together the report on everything that we found and the methodologies and the guidance, and that's up on the Commit website now under the BIM pages. So actually it's under one of the project pages. So please do go up and have a look. It's only a draft at the moment, so if you're involved in that project, thank you very much indeed for your participation. It was really useful. Otherwise, just leaves me to say thank you very much, not only to John Stewart, but also Stuart Young for organising today. Brilliant. Really, really appreciate your hard efforts, and also for keeping us all entertained over the last year and a bit of being locked in our own bedrooms. Which has been a bit of a bit of a pain, but otherwise, thank you very much all, and have a very, very good weekend. Your jolly good health.
Cheers. Anything from John?
All right. Thanks for allowing me to participate. It was a good call. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it too. Stuart, anything from yourself?
No, just thanks for letting me speak again. I'll leave it to somebody else next time. It's 2 weeks.
Pleasure. Thanks very much for coming on. And thanks to all the participants, the questions. Another great session. See you all soon. Have a great weekend.
In the truck.
Thanks, you too.
Bye now. Thank you.